My mother slapped my son right in the middle of my sister's wedding, and I just stood there, frozen. Not because I was afraid, but because I realized this was the moment I had to choose: protect my child or protect the family's image. I never thought I'd witness the moment my 8-year-old son stood there, his cheek burning red from his grandmother's hand, simply because he couldn't find the words to speak in front of a crowd. Have you ever been in a situation where a child's silence was mistaken for defiance? If it were you, what would you have done? Leave me a comment and share your own family story. I'd love to hear it. And if you've ever felt torn between defending your child and maintaining family appearances, stay with me, because this story isn't just about a slap. It's about broken promises, silent wounds, and the journey to healing when everything seems shattered. My name is Caroline Walker. I'm the mother of an 8-year-old boy named Eli, the daughter of a woman who holds impossible expectations, and the older sister of a girl the family has always seen as the golden one. I'm also a divorced woman trying to raise her child in the middle of a storm we call family. I used to believe I had outgrown my mother's influence, until the day I stood in the middle of a grand ballroom in Seattle and watched her strike my son across the face because he couldn't speak. The story I'm about to tell isn't about blame. It's the story of how I, as a daughter and a mother, began to break the cycle of emotional inheritance that 3 generations of women in my family once called love. If you've ever endured in silence, if you've ever wondered whether your voice mattered, then this story is for you. The slap echoed through the ballroom. Time stopped as my 8-year-old son's small body froze, his eyes wide with shock, his cheek reddening under the crystal chandeliers of Seattle's Fairmont Olympic Hotel. 200 wedding guests fell silent. My mother stood over him, her hand still raised, her face twisted with disappointment. "Speak up!" she'd demanded seconds earlier. "Everyone is waiting." But Eli couldn't. The words wouldn't come. They never did when he was scared. That was the moment my sister's perfect wedding came crashing down. But to understand how we got there, how my mother ended up striking my child in front of everyone we knew, I need to go back to where it started, in my kitchen in Portland, with chocolate chip cookies and a phone call that should have been harmless. "Mom's calling," Eli had announced 3 weeks earlier, flour dusting his cheeks as he checked my buzzing phone. Winter rain lashed against our kitchen windows, and the oven hummed with warmth as we made our traditional Sunday cookies. I wiped my hands on my apron and took a deep breath before answering. Just like that, I was 12 years old again. Small, inadequate, never quite enough. "Caroline," my mother's voice was crisp. "Have you bought Eli's suit for the wedding yet? Nothing off the rack, please. And we need him to practice his table manners before he meets everyone." Rachel's in-laws are very particular. Rachel, my younger sister, the golden child, the perfect daughter who was marrying a neurosurgeon from a prominent Seattle family. Their wedding had consumed my mother's every waking thought for months. "We have the suit, Mom," I lied, watching Eli carefully measure chocolate chips. His small hands moved with precision, 1, 2, 3 chips at a time. He needed order, structure, predictability, things my mother had never understood about him. "And Caroline," she continued as if I hadn't spoken, "make sure you do something about his nervousness. It's embarrassing when he can't even answer simple questions from adults." I glanced at my son. His shoulders had tensed at the sound of my mother's voice, even from across the room. Eli had been diagnosed with anxiety last year. He struggled with crowds and unfamiliar situations. Speaking in public was his greatest fear. "He's 8, Mom. He's just shy." "Well, fix it before the wedding. I won't have him hiding behind your legs the entire time. Rachel deserves perfection." After hanging up, I stood motionless in the kitchen. The familiar knot of tension had formed in my chest, the one that appeared whenever I spoke to my mother. "Was that Grandma?" Eli asked quietly, his eyes focused on the cookie dough. "Yes, sweetie. She's excited about Aunt Rachel's wedding." He nodded slowly, pressing a cookie cutter into the dough with deliberate care. "Will there be a lot of people there?" "Yes," I admitted, "but Grandpa Frank will be there too, and you know how he always has the best stories." Eli's face brightened at the mention of my father. "Can I stay with him at the party?" "Of course." I smoothed his hair. "And remember, you don't have to talk to anyone if you don't want to." It was a promise I would break. Not because I wanted to, but because sometimes the cycles we're born into are stronger than the promises we make to break them. The Fairmont Olympic stood like a palace in downtown Seattle, its sandstone walls glowing warmly against the February sky. Inside, flowers worth more than my monthly mortgage payment adorned every surface. Crystal and gold accents caught the light, creating an atmosphere of opulence that made me feel instantly underdressed despite my carefully chosen navy dress. "You're late!" my mother hissed as we entered the bridal suite. Rachel sat surrounded by bridesmaids, a vision in white. Her smile tightened when she saw us. "Sorry, traffic from Portland was—" "And what happened to his pants?" My mother's perfectly manicured finger pointed accusingly at Eli, who shrank behind me. Despite my best efforts, his dress pants had developed creases during the 3-hour drive. "They're fine, Mom. No one will notice." "I notice." She turned to one of the hotel staff. "Get an iron. Now." As the attendant scurried away, I felt Eli's small hand slip into mine, squeezing tightly. I squeezed back. Our secret code. "I'm here. I've got you." "Caroline, you need to help with Rachel's veil," my mother commanded. "Leave Eli with me. I'll fix his clothes." Fear flashed across my son's face. I hesitated, torn between the two greatest forces in my life, the need to protect my child and the lifetime habit of obeying my mother. "I'll take him." My father's voice broke through the tension as he appeared in the doorway. "Come on, sport. Let's go find some cake to sample before the ceremony." Relief flooded through me as Eli eagerly moved toward my father. Dad winked at me, the same conspiratorial wink he'd given me throughout my childhood, whenever he'd shielded me from Mom's perfectionism. As they left, my mother's disapproval radiated through the room. "You baby him, Caroline. That's why he's so anxious. If you just push him a little harder—" "Like you pushed me?" The words escaped before I could stop them. The room fell silent. Rachel's bridesmaids suddenly became very interested in their bouquets. My mother's smile never faltered, but her eyes hardened. "I made you successful. You're a respected attorney because I didn't let you hide from challenges." "I'm successful despite how you raised me, not because of it," I whispered, but not quietly enough. Rachel stood suddenly, her wedding dress rustling. "Can we not do this today? Please?" Shame washed over me. This was her day, not the time to unpack 35 years of family dysfunction. I nodded silently and moved to help with her veil, pushing down the familiar feelings of inadequacy and resentment. As I pinned delicate crystals into my sister's hair, I caught my reflection in the mirror. The resemblance to my mother was striking. Same determined jaw, same analytical eyes. The thought terrified me. How much of her lived in me? Would I someday hurt Eli the way she had hurt me, despite my best intentions? I thought of the night before Eli was born, how I'd sat alone in his nursery and whispered a promise into the darkness. "I will never make you feel the way she made me feel." 8 years later, I wondered if any of us could truly escape the patterns we were born into. The wedding ceremony proceeded with military precision. Each detail had been scrutinized, each flower placement approved, each musical note timed to perfection. Rachel glowed as she walked down the aisle toward James, her fiancé, whose adoring gaze never left her face. I sat in the front row beside Eli, who fidgeted with his suit jacket but remained mercifully quiet. Every few minutes, my father would slip him a small candy from his pocket, a silent reward for good behavior that my mother pretended not to notice. During the vows, I felt a pang of emotion watching my sister commit her life to someone who looked at her with such genuine love. My own marriage had ended 3 years ago when Mark decided that fathering a child with anxiety was more than he signed up for. The divorce paperwork had been finalized on Eli's 5th birthday. After the ceremony, guests streamed into the grand ballroom for the reception. Eli stuck close to my side as we navigated the crowd, his small body tensing with each introduction. "Caroline Walker, haven't seen you since law school," an old classmate called out, champagne flute in hand. "And who's this handsome young man?" Eli's grip on my hand tightened. "This is my son, Eli," I replied, gently placing my hand on his shoulder. "He's not much for small talk, but he's the best cookie baker in Portland." The woman laughed and moved on, much to Eli's relief. We continued our careful orbit around the room, avoiding the center where dancing had begun. "Speeches will begin shortly," the wedding planner announced. "Family members, please move to the head table." I guided Eli to our assigned seats near my parents. My father immediately engaged him in a quiet conversation about baseball, while my mother surveyed the room with critical eyes. The planned speeches went smoothly. The best man's gentle roast of James, the maid of honor's tearful tribute to Rachel's kindness. But just as the wedding planner signaled for the transition to dinner, my mother unexpectedly stood and took the microphone. My stomach dropped. This wasn't in the program. "I'd like to say a few words about family," she began, her voice carrying effortlessly across the room. "About legacy and future generations." She spoke about Rachel and James, about their bright future, about the family they would build. Then her gaze shifted to our table. "And speaking of future generations," she continued, her smile fixed on Eli, "I think it would be lovely to hear from the youngest member of our family. Eli, would you come up here and share a few words about your Aunt Rachel's special day?" The room fell silent. 200 pairs of eyes turned toward my 8-year-old son, whose face had gone completely white. "Mom," I whispered urgently, "he can't." "Nonsense," she responded without looking at me. "Eli, come up here, dear. Just a few words." Eli's breathing quickened. His hands began to shake. I recognized the signs of an oncoming panic attack and reached for him, but my mother's voice cut through again. "Eli, everyone's waiting." My father leaned forward. "Margaret, drop it. The boy doesn't have to speak." "Of course he does," my mother insisted, her smile never wavering. "It's important for children to learn to overcome their fears. Caroline, bring him up." Rachel shot me a pleading look from the head table. "Just do it. Don't make a scene." I felt trapped between impossible choices: protect my son or cause a public disruption at my sister's wedding. In that moment of hesitation, my mother made the decision for me. "I'll come get him myself," she announced, placing the microphone down and walking purposefully toward our table. Something inside me broke. I stood up. "Mom, no, he's not speaking. He has anxiety. You know this." Her eyes flashed with anger. "Sit down, Caroline. Don't embarrass us all." "You're embarrassing him by forcing this." The ballroom had gone uncomfortably quiet. James was whispering something to Rachel, who looked mortified. Guests shifted awkwardly in their seats. My mother reached our table and extended her hand to Eli. "Come with Grandma, dear." Eli looked up at me, his eyes wide with terror. I should have grabbed him and left. I should have stood firm. Instead, I hesitated. a lifetime of conditioning overriding my maternal instincts. In that moment of weakness, my mother took Eli's arm and gently but firmly pulled him from his chair. He went rigid but allowed himself to be led toward the microphone, his feet moving as if in a trance. I followed helplessly, aware of the spectacle we were creating, but unable to stop what was unfolding. At the microphone, my mother beamed with pride. "Here he is, everyone! Our youngest family member, here to wish the newlyweds well." She lowered the microphone to Eli's height. His small face was frozen in terror as he stared out at the sea of expectant faces. "Go ahead, dear," my mother prompted. "Just say congratulations to Aunt Rachel and Uncle James." Eli's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Seconds stretched into an eternity of silence. "Speak up," my mother urged, her smile tightening at the edges. "Everyone is waiting." More silence. A few uncomfortable coughs from the audience. "Eli," my mother's voice hardened as she knelt beside him. "Say something, right now." His lips trembled. Tears filled his eyes. And then it happened. My mother's hand moved so fast I couldn't stop it. The sound of palm against cheek cut through the silent ballroom like a gunshot. "Speak!" she hissed. Eli didn't cry out. He simply stood there, his small body rigid with shock, a red mark blooming across his pale cheek. The room collectively gasped. I lunged forward, fury replacing the paralysis that had held me moments before. "Don't you ever touch him!" I shouted, snatching Eli away from her and into my arms. His body trembled against mine. My mother's face registered genuine surprise, as if she couldn't comprehend why everyone was reacting so strongly. "I barely touched him. He needs to learn to—" Her words cut off abruptly as her hand flew to her chest. Her face contorted in pain, and she swayed on her feet. "Margaret?" My father stood up from his table, alarm in his voice. My mother's knees buckled. She collapsed to the floor before anyone could reach her. "Someone call an ambulance!" a voice shouted. Chaos erupted in the ballroom. Guests rose from their seats. My father rushed to my mother's side, loosening her necklace and checking her pulse. "Is she having a heart attack?" Rachel had appeared beside me, her white dress pooling around her as she knelt next to our mother. "I think so," my father replied grimly. "Her pulse is irregular." As the hotel staff cleared space for the paramedics, I stood frozen. Eli clutched to my chest. His face was buried against my shoulder, his breath coming in short, panicked gasps. "It's okay, baby," I whispered into his hair. "I've got you. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." James approached Rachel, placing a hand on her shoulder. His face was grim as he surveyed the scene. His new mother-in-law on the floor, his wife kneeling in her wedding dress, me clutching my traumatized son. "This isn't right," he said quietly. When Rachel looked up at him questioningly, he continued, his voice gaining strength. "None of this is right. What kind of family slaps a child for being unable to speak?" Rachel's face flushed. "James, not now. My mother is—" "Your mother just assaulted a child at our wedding," he interrupted, "and everyone just watched it happen until she collapsed. I can't be part of this." The paramedics burst through the doors, equipment in hand. "James, please," Rachel pleaded as they worked on our mother. He shook his head, backing away. "I need some time. This isn't the family I thought I was marrying into." As they loaded my mother onto a stretcher, my father turned to me. "Go with Eli. Get him somewhere quiet. I'll go with your mother to the hospital." I nodded numbly, finally finding the strength to move. As I carried Eli toward the exit, I heard Rachel's sob behind me, a sound of complete devastation as her new husband walked out of their reception. In the hotel corridor, away from prying eyes, I finally set Eli down and knelt before him. His cheek was still red, his eyes wide and unfocused. "Eli, I'm so sorry," I whispered, gently touching his unmarked cheek. "Grandma was wrong, so wrong, and I was wrong for not protecting you better." He didn't respond. His silence terrified me more than any tantrum or tears would have. "Can you say something, sweetie? Anything?" He looked at me with eyes too old for his face. "Is Grandma going to die because of me?" The question hit me like another slap. "No, baby, no. Grandma is sick, but it's not because of you. None of this is because of you." But I could see he didn't believe me, and in that sterile hotel hallway, as wedding music played distantly behind closed doors, I realized how deeply I had failed him. I'd promised to protect him from the trauma that had shaped my own childhood. Yet here we were. History repeating itself, the cycle continuing. I pulled him close again, my tears falling onto his carefully combed hair. "We're going home," I whispered, "right now." "But what about Aunt Rachel?" His voice was small, muffled against my dress. "Aunt Rachel has other people to help her right now," I said, though I wasn't sure if that was true. "You are my priority, always." As we walked through the hotel lobby, past curious stares and whispered conversations, I felt something shift inside me. The lifelong need to please my mother, to earn her approval, to maintain family peace at all costs. It was crumbling away, replaced by something fiercer and more primal. For the first time in my life, I didn't care what my mother thought. I didn't care about family appearances or obligations. All that mattered was the small hand in mine and the promise I'd made in a quiet nursery 8 years ago. I would not fail him again. 3 hours later, I sat in the hospital waiting room, staring at the institutional green walls. Eli had finally fallen asleep on the vinyl couch beside me, his small body curled into itself, his cheek still bearing a faint pink mark. The emergency room buzzed with activity around us: midnight crises, fluorescent lights, the antiseptic smell of fear and pain. I hadn't planned to come here. After leaving the wedding, I'd packed our bags at the hotel, intending to drive straight back to Portland. But my father's call had stopped us. "She's asking for you," he'd said simply. I'd almost refused. The memory of her hand striking Eli's face was too fresh, too raw. But something in my father's voice, a weariness I'd never heard before, had made me reconsider. So here we were, waiting. For what? I wasn't entirely sure. "Caroline." I looked up to see my father approaching, his bow tie undone, his wedding attire rumpled from hours of hospital waiting. "How is she?" I asked, not sure if I actually cared. He sank into the chair across from me. "Stable. It was a mild heart attack. They're keeping her overnight for observation." He glanced at Eli's sleeping form. "How is he?" "Traumatized," I replied bluntly. "He thinks he caused Grandma's heart attack by not speaking when she demanded it." My father winced. I should have stepped in sooner. I've always stepped in too late. Something in his tone caught my attention. I studied his face, the deep lines around his eyes, the slump of his shoulders, and realized how old he suddenly looked. "Dad, what's going on? This isn't just about tonight, is it?" He sighed heavily, running a hand through his thinning hair. Your mother has had heart problems for years. She didn't want anyone to know, especially not you girls. Years? Why wouldn't she tell us? Pride. He spread his hands helplessly. The same reason she pushes everyone so hard. The same reason she can't accept Eli's anxiety. Perfection is her armor, Caroline. Always has been. I shook my head, confused. Armor against what? My father glanced around the waiting room, then leaned forward, lowering his voice. Did you ever meet your maternal grandmother? Briefly, at her funeral. I was, 10? Mom never talked about her. There's a reason for that. He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Your grandmother was cruel, emotionally abusive, especially to your mother. Nothing Margaret did was ever good enough. No accomplishment was worthy of praise. Every flaw was magnified and used against her. I felt a chill run through me, like how Mom treats me. He nodded sadly. The patterns we learn in childhood are hard to break. Your mother swore she'd be different, that she'd raise daughters who were strong, confident, successful. In her mind, pushing you was protection. Demanding perfection was preparing you for a world that wouldn't accept anything less. That doesn't excuse what she did tonight, I said, glancing at Eli. She hit my child. No, my father agreed. It doesn't excuse it, but it might help explain it. He reached across and took my hand. When your mother saw Eli's anxiety, his inability to speak under pressure, it triggered something in her. A fear. She saw him as vulnerable in the same way she once was. I pulled my hand away. So she tried to fix him with public humiliation and physical punishment? How is that helping? It's not. It's her own trauma responding. He looked exhausted. The doctors think the stress of the wedding combined with her seeing herself in Eli, it was too much for her heart. We sat in silence as I absorbed this information. Across the room, a family erupted in relieved laughter as a doctor delivered good news. The contrast with our own shattered celebration couldn't have been more stark. Has anyone heard from Rachel? I finally asked. My father's expression darkened. She's with James, trying to convince him not to annul the marriage. He wants to annul it? Already? Apparently, seeing his new mother-in-law slap a child was a deal-breaker. There was no judgment in my father's voice, just weary acceptance. Can't say I blame him. The elevator doors opened, and Rachel emerged, still in her wedding dress, though her carefully styled hair had come undone and her makeup was streaked with tears. When she saw us, she halted momentarily before approaching with determined steps. "How's Mom?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "Stable," my father replied. "Where's James?" "At the hotel." Her face crumpled slightly. "He says he needs time to think." Her gaze fell on Eli and something hardened in her expression. "This wouldn't have happened if—" "Don't," I cut her off, an edge in my voice I'd never used with her before. "Don't you dare suggest this is Eli's fault. He's a child with anxiety who was publicly humiliated and then struck by his grandmother. None of this is on him." Rachel stared at me, surprise replacing the accusation in her eyes. I had never stood up to her before. The golden child, the perfect daughter, the one our mother adored. "I wasn't going to blame Eli," she said quietly. "I was going to say this wouldn't have happened if Mom had ever learned to accept imperfection. In any of us." The admission stunned me. Rachel sank into the chair beside our father, the voluminous skirt of her wedding dress billowing around her. "Do you know what James said to me?" she continued, staring at her diamond ring. He said he always thought my family was so perfect, so polished, but tonight he saw that it was all a facade, that underneath we're just broken. We're not broken, my father protested weakly. Rachel laughed, a brittle sound. Dad, my husband walked out of our wedding reception. My mother had a heart attack after slapping her grandson. My sister and I haven't had a real conversation in years because Mom always pitted us against each other. If that's not broken, I don't know what is. A nurse approached, clipboard in hand. Miss Walker, your mother is asking for you. Rachel and I both looked up. The nurse clarified. Caroline Walker? Rachel's face registered surprise, then hurt. I stood hesitantly, looking at Eli's sleeping form. I'll stay with him, my father promised. Go. As I followed the nurse through the sterile corridors, I wondered what my mother could possibly say to make any of this right. There were some wounds that apologies couldn't heal. Some lines that, once crossed, forever altered the landscape of a relationship. Yet, as I approached her room, I felt a strange sense of calm. For the first time in my life, I wasn't seeking her approval. I wasn't afraid of her disappointment. Whatever happened in that hospital room, I knew my priority when I walked out, and it was sleeping peacefully in the waiting area, trusting that I would finally, truly protect him. My mother looked small beneath the hospital sheets, her commanding presence diminished by the IV lines and monitoring equipment. Her makeup had been removed, revealing age spots and wrinkles she normally concealed. Without her armor of perfection, she looked surprisingly vulnerable. Caroline, she said as I entered, her voice weaker than I'd ever heard it. You came. I remained by the door, not yet ready to move closer. Dad said you wanted to see me. She nodded, then gestured to the chair beside her bed. After a moment's hesitation, I sat down, maintaining a careful distance. How is Eli? She asked. The question angered me. How do you think he is? You humiliated him in front of 200 people, then struck him across the face when he couldn't do what you demanded. He thinks he caused your heart attack. She flinched at my words. I didn't mean to. Yes, you did, I interrupted. You meant to force him to overcome what you see as weakness. You meant to mold him into your version of perfect, just like you tried to do with me, just like your mother did to you. Surprise flickered across her face. Your father told you. He told me enough. I leaned forward. But it doesn't excuse what you did. Not even close. My mother closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, they were shining with tears. Something I'd seen perhaps twice in my entire life. I know, she whispered. I know it doesn't. The simple admission caught me off guard. In 35 years, I had never heard my mother acknowledge a mistake. She continued, her voice unsteady. When I saw Eli freeze up there, unable to speak, looking so frightened and helpless, I saw myself as a child, standing in my mother's living room while her bridge club waited for me to recite poetry. The terror of disappointing her, the certainty of punishment. Her hand moved to her chest, resting over her heart. I became her in that moment, the very thing I swore I'd never be. You became her long before tonight, Mom, I said quietly. Every criticism, every impossible standard, every comparison between me and Rachel. You've been her all along. She didn't deny it. Instead, tears slipped down her cheeks, silent, dignified even in vulnerability. I thought I was protecting you, she said. The world is cruel to those who show weakness. I wanted you both to be stronger than I was, better prepared. By breaking us down first, by making us doubt ourselves so thoroughly that we'd spend our lives seeking approval we could never earn? My mother's hand trembled slightly as she reached for the water glass beside her bed. I watched her struggle for a moment before relenting and helping her, bringing the straw to her lips. "I failed you," she said after drinking. "I see that now. I failed both you and Rachel. And tonight, I failed Eli too." Her eyes met mine directly. "I'm sorry, Caroline. Truly sorry." In all my imagined confrontations with my mother, I'd never envisioned her apologizing. I'd expected defensiveness, justification, perhaps even anger, but not this raw vulnerability. "I don't know if sorry is enough," I admitted. "Not for Eli." "No," she agreed softly. "It isn't, but it's where I have to start." A nurse entered to check vitals, and we fell silent. I watched as she recorded numbers, adjusted equipment, and spoke to my mother in the gentle, slightly condescending tone reserved for elderly patients. My mother, who would normally have bristled at such treatment, accepted it meekly. After the nurse left, my mother spoke again. "Rachel's marriage. Did I ruin it?" "I don't know," I answered honestly. "James is reconsidering things." Fresh pain crossed her face. "All I wanted was a perfect day for her." "Maybe perfect isn't what any of us needed," I suggested. "Maybe what we needed was real, honest, messy, and imperfect, but genuine." My mother considered this, her fingers pleating the edge of her hospital sheet, a nervous gesture I'd never seen before. "Your father and I," she began hesitantly. "We're starting therapy next month. Had planned to, even before tonight. His idea, initially, but I agreed. I think it's time to address some things." The admission stunned me. Therapy had always been dismissed in our family as a weakness, a crutch for those not strong enough to handle their problems privately. That's good, Mom." She reached for my hand cautiously, as if expecting me to pull away. I allowed the contact, though it felt strange. Physical affection had been rare in our household growing up. "I want to try to be better," she said, "for all of you, even if it's too late to undo the harm I've caused." I studied her face, searching for the manipulation or conditional love that had characterized our relationship for decades. Instead, I saw only tiredness and regret. "It might be too late for some things," I acknowledged, "but maybe not for everything." We sat in silence for a while, the beeping monitors providing a steady background rhythm. Outside the window, dawn was breaking over Seattle, pale light seeping into the room. "Will you bring Eli to see me before you go back to Portland?" she finally asked. "Not to apologize. I know he shouldn't have to see me right now. Just, I'd like to write him a letter. Would you give it to him?" I considered this. "I'll give him a letter, but only after I've read it first, and only if he wants it." She nodded, accepting these conditions. "That's fair." As I stood to leave, she caught my hand once more. "Caroline?" "Yes?" "You're a better mother than I ever was. The way you protect Eli, the way you see him for who he is instead of who you think he should be, that's true strength." The words hit me with unexpected force, releasing something that had been tightly wound inside me for as long as I could remember. I didn't trust myself to speak, so I simply nodded and gently extracted my hand from hers. In the hallway, I leaned against the wall, overwhelmed by emotions I couldn't fully name. Grief for the mother I'd never had. Relief at finally being seen. Hope, fragile but present, that something might change. And beneath it all, a growing certainty that regardless of what happened with my mother, I was breaking the cycle where it mattered most, with my son. We didn't go back to Portland that day. Instead, we checked into a different hotel, away from wedding guests and family drama, where Eli and I ordered room service and watched animated movies back to back. He barely spoke, but he stayed close to me, his small body curled against mine on the king-sized bed. By evening, the events of the day caught up with me. As Kung Fu Panda played on the hotel television, I found myself crying silently. For my sister's ruined wedding, for my mother's damaged heart, for my son's wounded spirit, and for the little girl I'd once been, always striving for an approval that never came. "Mom?" Eli's voice was tentative as he noticed my tears. "Are you sad?" I wiped my eyes quickly. "A little, buddy. It's been a hard day." He nodded solemnly. "For everyone." "Especially for you," I said, gently touching his cheek where my mother had struck him. The mark was gone, but I knew the invisible wound remained. He considered this. "Grandma is sick." "Yes, she is, but that doesn't make what she did okay." "I know." He picked at a loose thread on the hotel comforter. "Is she sick in her heart or sick in her head?" The question, delivered with a child's innocent precision, stopped me short. "Both, I think," I finally answered. Sometimes when people are hurt inside for a very long time, they hurt others without meaning to. "Like a chain reaction," he said, surprising me with his insight. "Yes, exactly like that. But chains can be broken." Eli contemplated this, his forehead furrowed in concentration. "Are we going to see Grandma again before we go home?" I studied his face, looking for fear or reluctance. "Do you want to?" He shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "Maybe. I made her heart get sick." "No, Eli," I said firmly, turning his face toward mine. "You did not make Grandma sick. Her heart has been sick for a long time, and it has nothing to do with you not being able to talk at the wedding. Nothing. Promise?" "I promise." I held his gaze, willing him to believe me. "And I promise something else too. I will never let anyone hurt you like that again. Not Grandma, not anyone. I should have stopped her sooner, and I'm so sorry I didn't." He leaned against me, silent for a long moment. Then, in a voice so quiet I almost missed it, he said, "I would have said that Aunt Rachel looks pretty in white. That's all I had." My heart broke all over again. I pulled him close, kissing the top of his head. "That would have been perfect, sweetheart. Absolutely perfect." The following morning, Rachel called. I almost didn't answer, afraid of the blame I was sure would come. But when I did, her voice surprised me. "James is coming back," she said without preamble. "We talked all night. He's not ending the marriage." Relief flooded through me. "That's good news, Rach." "He has conditions." A pause. "Family therapy, all of us. He says he won't bring children into this family as it is now." I glanced at Eli, who was methodically arranging his breakfast on the hotel plate. Pancake, then strawberries, then exactly 2 tablespoons of syrup in a perfect circle. "He might be right," I admitted. "I know," Rachel said quietly. "I've been Mom's favorite my whole life, and even I can see how messed up we are." Her voice cracked slightly. "Caroline, I'm so sorry about Eli. I should have stopped her too." The apology was unexpected. Rachel and I had spent so many years as competitors rather than sisters that genuine communication between us felt almost foreign. "We all should have stopped her," I said. "Years ago." Another pause. Are you going to see her today? The doctors say she can go home tomorrow. I don't know. Eli asked about seeing her, but I'm not sure it's a good idea. Dad said she wrote Eli a letter. I sighed. She mentioned that. I told her I'd read it first. Of course, Rachel agreed. Listen, whatever you decide about seeing Mom, can you and I have coffee first? Just us? 20 years of complicated history hung in the question. 20 years of being pitted against each other by our mothers' constant comparisons, of measured affection and conditional approval. I'd like that, I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. 2 hours later, we sat across from each other at a quiet cafe several blocks from the hospital. Rachel had traded her wedding gown for jeans and an oversized sweater, her face bare of makeup, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked younger, more vulnerable, more like the sister I'd protected on the playground before our mother's manipulations had driven us apart. I always envied you, she said suddenly, stirring her latte. Did you know that? I laughed in surprise. No. Me? Mom's disappointment? The career-focused single mother who couldn't even keep her husband? Rachel shook her head. The brave one. The one who lived her own life instead of the one Mom scripted. The one who got away. She looked up at me. When you moved to Portland after your divorce, I was secretly so proud of you. You chose Eli over everything else. Over Mom's disapproval, over the prestigious Seattle law firm she'd lined up for you, over all of it. It didn't feel brave, I admitted. It felt like survival. It was both. She traced the rim of her cup thoughtfully. James says I've spent my whole life trying to be perfect for Mom instead of figuring out who I actually am. That sounds painfully accurate. Yeah. She glanced out the window, her expression distant. You know what's ironic? Mom's collapse might have saved my marriage before it even really started. James said, watching everyone's reaction to her slapping Eli was like seeing behind the curtain of our family. He said my reaction, or lack of reaction, scared him more than Mom's behavior. I remained silent, remembering how Rachel had sat frozen, how none of us had moved quickly enough to protect Eli. He's right, she continued. We're all so conditioned to keep the peace, to maintain the facade, that we've normalized something toxic. She reached across the table and took my hand. I don't want to be like that anymore. I don't want to be Mom's version of perfect. I want to be real. The simple declaration brought tears to my eyes. I'd like to know the real you. Me too. She smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. I think she's been hiding for about 30 years. After coffee, we walked to the hospital together, a united front for perhaps the first time in our adult lives. Eli had elected to stay with my father, who had promised a trip to the Seattle Aquarium as distraction. My mother was sitting up in bed when we entered her room, already dressed in regular clothes, her makeup carefully applied despite the hospital setting. Some habits died hard. My girls, she said, her voice stronger than the day before. Both of you. Together. I could hear the surprise in her tone. Rachel and I exchanged glances, a silent acknowledgement passing between us. How are you feeling, Mom? Rachel asked, moving to kiss her cheek. Ready to leave this place, she replied, automatic briskness covering vulnerability. Then, with visible effort, she softened. But grateful to be alive, to have a chance to do things differently. Her eyes found mine. Did you read it? I pulled the envelope from my bag, the letter she'd written to Eli, delivered by a nurse that morning. Yes. And? It's a start, I said carefully. But words need to be followed by actions. She nodded, accepting this. I know. I meant what I wrote, Caroline. Every word. The letter had been surprisingly humble. An unequivocal apology, an acknowledgement of wrongdoing, a promise to respect Eli's boundaries in the future. No excuses, no veiled criticisms disguised as concern. Just accountability from a woman who had never before admitted fault. Eli decided not to come today, I told her. He needs more time. But he said I could give him your letter when we get home. Disappointment flashed across her face, quickly replaced by understanding. Of course. I wouldn't expect anything else. She hesitated, then added, when you think he might be ready, I'd like to try again. On his terms, not mine. Rachel moved to sit on the edge of the bed. Mom, James and I have been talking about the future, about family. Worry creased my mother's forehead. He still wants to be married? Yes, but with conditions. He wants us, all of us, to commit to family therapy, to work on changing these patterns before we even think about having children. I expected resistance, perhaps even offense. Instead, my mother simply nodded. He's a wise man, your husband. Wiser than I gave him credit for. She glanced between us. I think your father has already found someone, a therapist who specializes in intergenerational trauma. The clinical term sounded strange coming from my mother, who had always dismissed psychological explanations as excuses for weakness, but her face was serious, her eyes clear. Will you both consider it? She asked. Coming to family sessions? I understand if it's too much to ask, especially from you, Caroline. After what I did to Eli, I'll come, I interrupted. Not for you, initially, for Eli, for myself, for the chance to break this cycle once and for all. I met her gaze directly. But I have conditions too, non-negotiable ones. Name them, she said without hesitation. You never pressure Eli again. About speaking, about his anxiety, about anything. You accept him exactly as he is. She nodded. Yes. You get proper treatment for your heart condition, and you're honest with us about your health going forward. Another nod. Already scheduled follow-up appointments. And you never, ever lay a hand on my child again. If you do, we're done. Permanently. I would sooner cut off my own hand, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I promise you, Caroline, never again. The room fell silent except for the muted hospital sounds filtering through the door. It felt like standing on the edge of something, not yet healed, but no longer actively bleeding. A starting point. So, Rachel said, breaking the silence, we try. Together, as a deeply flawed, slightly damaged, but not irredeemable family. My mother reached for both our hands. I allowed the contact, feeling the paper-thin skin, the prominent veins, the slight tremor that hadn't been there a year ago. She was aging, mortal, not the invincible force I'd feared my entire life. Together, she agreed, however long it takes. 3 months passed. Spring arrived in Portland, bringing cherry blossoms and rainstorms in equal measure. Eli and I fell back into our routines, school drop-offs, work deadlines, Sunday cookie baking. But subtle changes had taken root beneath the familiar patterns. Twice monthly, we drove to Seattle for family therapy sessions. Awkward at first, then gradually more productive as we learned a new language of boundaries and honest communication. My mother attended, as promised, though she often sat rigid with discomfort as decades of family dysfunction were gently but persistently exposed and examined. Eli remained cautious around her. Their interactions were limited to supervised visits, brief and structured. The first time she saw him after the wedding disaster, she knelt down to his eye level, something I'd never seen her do before, and spoke to him directly. I was wrong, Eli, she'd said simply. What I did was wrong, and I am very sorry. I will never do anything like that again. He'd studied her face carefully before nodding once, accepting her words without offering immediate forgiveness. I'd felt fiercely proud of his self-protection, his instinct to require proof of change rather than empty promises. Small shifts accumulated. My father called more often, his voice lighter without the strain of peacekeeping. Rachel and I texted daily, sharing jokes and frustrations without the competitive edge that had previously defined our relationship. James, initially skeptical, had begun to relax his guard during family gatherings, noting the incremental improvements with cautious optimism. And my mother was trying, really trying. She still slipped occasionally into critical comments or controlling behaviors, but now she caught herself, apologized, attempted to reframe. She'd started carrying a small notebook where she jotted observations from therapy, a tangible commitment to change that surprised us all. In late May, Rachel called with unexpected news. "We're doing it again," she announced. "The wedding. You're already married," I reminded her, cradling the phone between ear and shoulder as I sorted laundry. "I know, but not the way we wanted, not with joy." Her voice brightened. "So we're having a do-over. Small, intimate, just family and a few close friends. At Dad's lake house next weekend. No grand ballroom, no 3-tier cake, no military precision. Just us, being real with each other." I hesitated. "Are you sure that's what you want? Not what Mom wants?" "Positive. Mom's actually against it. Says we shouldn't waste money on a second ceremony. But this isn't about her. It's about James and me starting our marriage with honesty instead of perfection." "Then I'll be there," I promised, with bells on. "And Eli?" she asked cautiously. "No pressure. He doesn't have to come if he's not comfortable." I glanced through the doorway to where my son sat at the kitchen table, carefully constructing a Lego spaceship. In the months since the wedding incident, he'd started seeing a child psychologist who specialized in anxiety. Slowly, he was developing tools to manage his fears, finding his voice in safe spaces. "Let me talk to him," I said. "It should be his choice." That evening, as we walked home from the neighborhood park, I broached the subject carefully. "Aunt Rachel is having a small wedding ceremony next weekend, very different from the last one. Just a few people at Grandpa's lake house. Would you like to go?" Eli kicked at a pebble on the sidewalk. "Will Grandma be there?" "Yes, but you wouldn't have to talk to her if you don't want to. You wouldn't have to do anything you don't feel comfortable with. I promise." He was quiet for several steps, his face thoughtful. "I've been writing something," he finally said. "In therapy, Dr. Martina helped me." "Writing what, buddy?" "A poem. About family." He glanced up at me. "She said sometimes when it's hard to say things out loud, you can write them down first." Understanding dawned. "And you'd like to read this poem? At the wedding?" He nodded hesitantly. "Maybe. If I can stand next to you, and if I can stop if it gets too scary." I fought back sudden tears. "Of course you can. Anytime it feels too much, you just squeeze my hand, and we'll stop. No questions asked." The following weekend, we gathered at my father's modest lake house in the Cascade foothills. The contrast with the previous wedding couldn't have been more stark. No elaborate floral arrangements, no crystal champagne flutes, no orchestra. Instead, wildflowers in mason jars decorated the dock where Rachel and James would renew their vows. And a local guitarist played acoustic melodies as guests arrived. My mother had maintained remarkable restraint in the planning, offering suggestions only when asked, accepting decisions that went against her aesthetic preferences. She'd arrived early to help, but had deliberately stepped back from taking charge, a visible effort that hadn't gone unnoticed by Rachel. As the small gathering of 20 or so people took their seats on rented folding chairs, I felt Eli's hand slip into mine. "Nervous?" I asked softly. He nodded, clutching a folded piece of paper in his other hand. "Remember, you can change your mind at any time. No pressure." "I want to try," he whispered back. "Dr. Martinez says brave people feel scared, but do things anyway." The simple ceremony began. Rachel wore a simple cream dress. No train, no veil. Her hair loose around her shoulders. James beamed at her with the same adoration he'd shown at their first wedding, perhaps even deeper now for having witnessed her commitment to change. They exchanged heartfelt vows, promising not perfect love, but honest love, not flawless partnership, but genuine growth together. When they kissed, cheers erupted from the small assembly, authentic joy unburdened by pretense. After the official remarks concluded, Rachel stepped forward. "Before we move to the celebration, my nephew Eli has something he'd like to share, if he feels comfortable doing so." All eyes turned to us, and I felt Eli's grip tighten. I squeezed back reassuringly. "You don't have to," I whispered. He took a deep breath, then stood and moved forward, still clutching my hand. From my peripheral vision, I saw my mother tense, then deliberately relax, her hands folded carefully in her lap. Eli unfolded his paper with trembling fingers. His voice, when it came, was soft but clear, carrying across the hushed gathering. "Family bonds," he read. "Sometimes families break. Like Lego towers falling down. The pieces hurt when you step on them, but you can build something new, something stronger, something that looks different but fits better. It takes time and patience, and sometimes the instructions get lost, but the pieces still belong together, just in a new way." He paused, his breath catching slightly. I felt him squeeze my hand, our signal. But instead of stopping, he took another breath and continued. "I am learning to be brave. Grandma is learning to be kind. Mom is learning to trust again. We are all learning together. That's what makes us family. Not being perfect, just trying, every day." Silence fell as he finished. Then someone, I think it was James, began to clap. Others joined in, a wave of gentle approval washing over my son, who stood straighter with each moment, a flush of pride replacing his fear. As we returned to our seats, I noticed my mother discreetly wiping tears from her eyes. When Eli walked past her, she made no move to touch him or speak to him, respecting the boundaries we'd established. But she nodded once, a gesture of profound respect that didn't ask for anything in return. Later, as twilight settled over the lake and lanterns were lit around the property, my mother approached us. She carried a small, wrapped package. "May I give this to Eli?" she asked me first, honoring our agreement about gifts and interactions. I glanced at Eli, who nodded cautiously. "It's not much," she said, handing him the package. "Just something that might help." Eli unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a wooden pin, handcrafted and polished to a warm glow. "For when words are hard to say out loud," my mother explained, "you have important things to share with the world, Eli. Whatever way you choose to share them is the right way." He ran his fingers over the smooth wood, his expression thoughtful. "Thank you," he said simply. "Your poem was beautiful," she continued, maintaining a respectful distance. "You are a very brave young man." She turned to me. "And you've raised an extraordinary son, Caroline. I hope someday you'll both be able to forgive me." Before I could respond, she walked away, joining my father by the water's edge. I watched as he put his arm around her shoulders, a gesture of support that seemed both familiar and new in its genuine tenderness. "Mom?" Eli's voice pulled me back. I think I'm ready to go talk to Aunt Rachel now, by myself. I watched as he crossed the lawn to where Rachel and James stood speaking with guests. My sister's face lit up when she saw him approach, and she immediately knelt to his level, a gesture so unlike the family I'd grown up in, where children were expected to rise to adult standards, never the reverse. As darkness fell over the lake, I found myself standing alone at the edge of the property, watching my family from a slight distance, not out of exclusion, but from the perspective shift that comes with healing. They weren't perfect. We weren't perfect. The road ahead would have setbacks and struggles, old patterns reasserting themselves when we least expected. But something fundamental had changed. The cycle of perfectionism, criticism, and emotional withdrawal that had defined 3 generations of our family had been interrupted. Not completely broken, perhaps, but significantly weakened. As I turned to join them, Rachel caught my eye across the gathering and raised her glass in a silent toast. I raised my imaginary one in return, acknowledging what we both knew, that sometimes the most damaging things must be completely shattered before they can be rebuilt into something stronger, truer, and finally, imperfectly whole.